Welcome to General Grudge Reacts, video series where I use this as an excuse to watch videos on YouTube that I ain't had time to watch. Today I'm going to watch Upper Echelon's Are You Addicted to Gaming? Big Upper Echelon fan. I've watched him ever since the time he did the Division videos and so forth. And he's a really smart guy, so let's see if we are addicted to gaming.
All right, snappy title, yes, and I'd hazard a guess that no, most of you watching this are not actually addicted to video games, but you may have started to see this floating around, this advertisement on YouTube and elsewhere in Google's
I have
advertising
not.
portal, for something called Guardian Legal Network. You may be owed compensation. That's the hook, I suppose. Everybody wants a payday, but what's more interesting is that Guardian Legal Network is facilitating a lawsuit now against pretty much every single AAA gaming publisher on the basis that their games are inherently and deliberately addictive. To be completely honest here, Guardian Legal Network is not an actual collection of lawyers, it's an advertising service that pairs victims with lawyers. And the whole thing reeks
Okay, I can already tell this isn't going to be what I thought it was going to be about.
of a legal scam. Get a bunch of people, tell them, oh my gosh, you've been harmed so very much, and then sue a company and keep all the money for yourself by jacking up the cost of your time that you spent building the case. But the thing that really got me thinking is that video games kind of actually do have a blind spot right now. Yes,
If this is a lawsuit and it does go through, what we all know what happens. The lawyers get all the money and everybody else gets $5.
the title is grabby. No, you, the audience watching this right now, probably don't have an actual medically definable addiction to gaming. But the industry is increasingly predicated on addiction. Games are intentionally designed to be addictive. Cross pollination between video games and traditional casino gambling is rising exponentially. And whether or not I agree,
Maybe this is an addict talking, but I'm looking for games right now that are addictive, especially if I could find a AAA game that was enjoyable and addictive and I couldn't wait to keep playing it like in the old days, but it's hard anymore. You could argue I'm addicted right now to Enshrouded. That'd be the closest thing. I'm enjoying that a lot.
or disagree with the premise of this new class action lawsuit, it's very possible that they will make headway, and I wanted to have a reasonable discussion about why. First things first, again, independent from whether or not we agree with this, Internet Gaming Disorder is an official classification of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, also known as DSM 5, as well as a classification by the WHO in ICD 11. It's a substance related addictive disorder, which kind of builds the necessary legal foundation needed.
And one thing people need to realize is when these researchers or psychiatrists they designate something as a disorder, it's not a real necessarily physical thing. It's just something they're categorizing in a certain way. They're making this a disorder when it isn't necessarily a disorder, or it's actually a different disorder that they're putting in another category.
In order to have some sort of lawsuit. Second, and far more importantly, there is a huge amount of cross industry influence between gambling and video games far beyond the scope of what most players actually realize, and that is likely where the bulk of targeting will occur. I don't think anyone will fully disagree with this, but loot boxes actually are gambling. Loot
Yes.
boxes, whatever you decide to call them, like surprise mechanics if you're Electronic Arts, are unregulated, deliberately targeted, underage gambling mechanics with a paper thin disguise aimed at normalizing them for a video game audience. When
100%
it comes
agree.
to governmental regulation, the wheels are slow, very slow, obviously. But the entire core premise of randomized loot box monetization with a rarity curve and different reward qualities.
I'm not usually big on wanting the government to make laws, but I wish they would do something to outlaw all these loot boxes and all this kind of gambling in games. But you know they won't. They'll just find a way to monetize it for taxes and stuff.
Is actually worse than traditional gambling in many cases because the RTP, the return to player, and the specific odds of winning what you want when you want are either significantly lower than mandated casino minimums by law or undisclosed. That one's easy. We all know that. We all hate it, and loot boxes are an invasion of gambling into modern video games that need to stop. But what we don't focus on as much is how pervasive the other similarities are becoming. To explain this, I need to talk about two concepts: intrinsic and extrinsic player motivation. Intrinsic player motivation is the good stuff. It's basically the holy grail of game design, and it takes place when a player is motivated to perform tasks in a video game based on personal enjoyment of the actual experience. It's effectively when you
Looks
perform
like
an
a cool
activity
game. I wonder what that
because
is.
you enjoy the activity itself. which is theoretically how most video games should be if they're actually built as entertainment products. Extrinsic motivation is when the player performs a task primarily for some sort of incentive.
They really need to build a next-gen Oregon's Trail. I wonder if that's what that was. Probably not, but my wife would love that.
And you can break this down into multiple separate formats, such as rewarding the player for their completion or performance during the activity, etc. But the key takeaway is that extrinsic motivation is the art of capturing a player's time, even when they might not actually want to be doing the activity itself. They want the reward, but they're not playing because the activity itself is fun. They're playing because it's a vehicle to get the dopamine hit they actually desire. And that's a different thing, right? See the difference? Here's the part
Yes.
where I need an example, and please do keep in mind, I'm not saying anything bad about this game. I'm just using it to briefly explain why the industry might have a bit of a blind spot
What
right
game?
now,
Upper Echelon?
and why an organization like Guardian Legal Network has decided to step forward and start kind of preying on people, I guess, if I had to put it in those words. Vampire Survivors, that's the example.
That's a
Funnily
great
enough,
game.
Vampire Survivors is actually described as addictive by pretty much every single person who praises it. It won multiple game awards, including
This is one of my favorite games of all time. I love it so much. It's definitely the best dollar to gameplay ratio I've ever had. I completely 100%ed it, at least before they started updating it again, on Steam Deck originally. And then when it came out on Xbox, I did it again, and I loved every second of it. Now there's a new update out, something about space. I haven't got around to it yet, but I'm definitely going to play that. This game, I bought this game for $3 and something in early access, and I mean, I got hundreds of hours of gameplay in it.
Best Debut Indie Game, and for good reason. But it also contains heavy emphasis from the casino industry. Game designer Luca Gallant previously worked in the gambling world and distilled
You're
his
kidding me.
experience there down into an indie game predicated on the idea of capturing player attention for just one more game as long as humanly possible, leading to this. This is, again, for the sake of example,
Oh god, what in the world kind of ad is this? I'm not watching this.
Baron Von Games, describing the title in his video called Vampire Survivors is the best video game of 2022 so far, and here's what he said.
I'm really excited to show you this game, but I'm also kind of worried. Well, if you watch at least 3 to 5 minutes of this game, I promise you're gonna be like, okay, I get it. And then you're gonna have to battle this game because it's addictive. That is just the facts of it.
I disagree. Just watching the people play this game online, I thought this doesn't look for me. This looks old, looks crappy, looks too simple. I won't enjoy it. But then we got a new dog that was a puppy, and I had to spend more time with it instead of playing video games. And I sit there. I needed something to play on my new Steam Deck, so I bought Vampire Survivors. And once I played it, I realized, okay, now I get it. It wasn't until then though that I did.
You're going to have to battle this game because it's addictive. That's just the facts of it. I thought that was extremely interesting, but it really is just one example in a larger pattern. See, even though the topic of addiction is actually quite serious, video game culture has a bit of a different relationship to that word. For
Right.
video games, addictive is a superlative word. Addictive means good. It means you want to play more, and it gets used synonymously with the word fun. I've done it myself. It's a very common way to speak about video games. Fundamentally, there's no problem there until you start to realize the overlap. Why? Because the relationship where video games are drawing inspiration from the extrinsic motivation of casinos is not a one-way street. Casinos are also gamifying their property with increasing speed, including slots, loyalty programs, and even dealer games. This means that we have two different industries, distinctly different at a previous point in time, that are now drawing from each other with increasing speed. On one side, gambling is augmented and disguised in order to be used as monetized.
Okay, I'm going to let him finish in a Kanye West sort of way, but what confuses me here is obviously there's an addiction that's just stealing your money away from you, impoverishing you, and making you poor, and destroying your marriage and destroying your health. And another addiction where the only thing it's taking away from you is time. And yeah, time is money, but it's only an addiction in gaming if it's taking you away from like you actually going to your job and doing what you need to do. You actually eating, you actually keeping in shape. You're doing the other stuff in your life that you have to do for your health and your safety. Instead, you're playing games. That would be addictive. And I guess, and I don't mean it very broadly. I mean like to where it's destroying your life, not just in any little fashion, but like where, like you can't hold a job down because you want to play games. That would be definitely addictive.
Monetization techniques, while on the other, gameplay mechanisms are distilled, refined, included in slot machines or other payout based activities to maximize player engagement ratios. Here's another example. Call of Duty World War II, the 2017 installation of the franchise, allowed players to get rewards from watching other people open loot boxes.
It's just
For
low,
anyone who
man.
misunderstands why that's important, from the Morris Psychology Group, quote, casinos actively control their sound environment. Most use upbeat music to create excitement, but they also use ringing bells or sirens to signify that people are winning. When people see and hear that others are winning, it creates a sense of possibility and even an expectation of winning, end quote. See, again, the same techniques used by casinos, extrinsic motivation techniques, are invasively prevalent now in video games. Here's another example. Psychology of the near miss originally rose to prominence in gambling, now frequently utilized by video game publishers all over the
Yeah, they do this like with scratch offs and those other things these people go by. Like it'll be like you have to have this. I can't remember how they work, but you have to have this shape or this so many in a row. And it seems like you're always going to lose. You know you're going to lose, but it's always just a little close, because they're fake. They're fake. They intentionally printed it to look close, so you thought, well, I almost got it this time. But you didn't. It was all a lie. It was all an illusion.
industry, and the list goes on. Of course, with all that said, most players
Gambling's just a
probably
tax
don't
on
meet
the
the threshold
low
necessary
IQ
to
and the
consider
stupid.
them addicted. Addiction is often classified when there is a significant amount of harm being caused, typically financial or social or something like that. But progression boosting or time-saving microtransactions in mobile video games, those are painstakingly constructed and targeted so that they pop up when you are in the most vulnerable state possible after intentionally
I know that kind of method works for cell phone games, but I don't understand it. Like, I don't understand if you're not enjoying your time playing the game, why are you playing the game? To me, that kind of stuff ruins the game. Like when DMZ, Call of Duty DMZ, added, perks that, where you could buy and it would save you from playing the game. Like you'd start with a, level 2 backpack or, you'd start with a self-revive, that kind of stuff. That ruins the game because then when you go in the game and you started with that stuff and then you find it in the world, it used to be really cool. I'm like, oh, yay, I found a self-revive or I found this, I found that. And then it means nothing because you start with it. It ruins the game. They're running their own games by doing that. From my point of view, I don't like it. I quit playing them. I don't enjoy them. I move on. But I guess not everybody's the same because they make billions of dollars doing this on cell phones.
disguising the true cost of those purchases by converting everything to some sort of in-game currency or premium currency, which also plays on your psychological vulnerabilities by having a discount structure baked into it at checkout. As if I need further examples, and this one's been talked about for years here on YouTube, there are entire development conferences where the subject is how to hunt whales by getting players to initially pay money, break the ice, then addict them to the extrinsic motivation loop and harvest as much as humanly possible. Zynga, owned by Take-Two Interactive, which is hilariously not present on Guardian Legal Network's list, even though it includes Rockstar, has an entire internal system for identifying the highest spending VIPs and keeping them on the hook, much like casinos, which
That's an interesting point. I wonder if he's going to get to a point. This kind of videos he would make after the fact. Like he'll go in and he'll study this and he'll find out certain gaming companies that use these addictive practices are actually using this as a front to go after their competitors. Kind of like the cigarette business or something like that. I don't know. I bet you. I'm predicting that'll be a future video.
have utilized similar VIP programs for decades. Speaking to GamesIndustry.biz, Vice President of Player Success Gemma Doyle says, quote, "We've done so much experimenting at Zynga with VIP. We know what's the frequency of contact. We know what call types work. We know what times to call. We know exactly who to call and when. We know who has a higher propensity to be more susceptible to our call," end quote. Because Zynga has an internal structure to identify when someone slows down their spending, at which point they, quote, "need to reach out and call them to find out what's wrong," end quote. See, the cross-pollination between video games and casinos is rising rapidly. The same tricks that were used by gambling establishments to prey on addiction are being used by video game publishers now to create addiction. And yet we, as an audience, happily refer to the addictive nature of these games in a positive way. My point here with all of this, gaming has a bit of a blind spot right now. Sure, a reasonably priced indie game that uses skillfully crafted extrinsic motivation techniques picked up from the casino industry certainly isn't a problem by itself. But when you consider the wider industry, it starts to make a lot more sense why a coalition of lawyers will have hired an advertising.
Off topic though, this game I was curious about what was if it's just a turn-based game. I probably wouldn't like it. Obviously, there's two big exceptions to that. I enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3 a lot, and my favorite game of all time is turn-based Civilization 5. But I don't know. Anyway, let's get back to the subject.
Firm to plaster their "you might be owed damages" post all over social media for personal gain. Ultimately, I can't possibly predict what will actually happen here, but if I had
Absolutely
to, here's
nothing.
my guess. A large collection of lawyers will harvest a huge amount of money from a group of people who either A, think that they can get an easy payday, or B, actually have an addiction problem. And after dragging the process as far as they possibly can, the lawyers, those victims will get a very small, very, very small payout after a settlement is reached so that a very few specific gaming publishers, the most egregious examples on the list probably, can avoid bad press. That's about it. Over time, maybe the trend will start to slow down or even back off a little bit, but the meshing of these two industries is lucrative for both parties involved, so I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. That's it though. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links down below. We finally have an actual merchandise line. Took a while. I've wanted to do that for quite a long time.
I have not one, but
couldn't
two
actually
Upper
make it
Echelon
happen till now.
t-shirts.
And pre-orders are open
Should have
for
worn one
30
for this
days.
video, but
Outside of that, there are some
don't think
affiliate
that far in
products like a
advance.
VPN. Buy that through the channel link if you're interested, or locals in Patreon, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, question everything and have a nice night.
all right, let's cue the giraffe video. I better make sure this don't have any autoplay on it. I guess it might have another
Hundreds of
commercial.
records to update.
Guess we have to watch
How on
that since
earth
we're
are you gonna do that?
farming this video.
One by one, of course.
All right, I consider that watched. Okay, so that was Upper Echelon. Are you addicted to gaming? It didn't follow the exact logic I was hoping it would. I was hoping it would be a video like, are you literally playing too much games? Are you doing this? Is it affecting your psychology? Is it affecting your life? Instead, it was more focused on the monetization side, the free-to-play stuff. And we all know that's garbage, and we shouldn't support that if we can help it. I know it's hard if you're a gamer. You want to play the new cool thing. I do the same thing too. When I was playing DMZ and enjoying it, I bought the Rose DLC where she had the, I can't remember what she started with. It might have been a self-revive or something. And I don't know. It's always a bad idea. Just ruins the games they're playing. Just make a good game, sell it for a fair price. We can buy it or not, and we'll play it until we're done. And then we'll move on. These free-to-play games, they want to make games where people play them forever. You know, every game has to be Minecraft now. It's the only game you play, and you play it for years. You know, I'm sick of that. I'm a gamer. I want to buy a game, play it for ever how many hours, move on to the next one. I want a new experience. I want to buy a new game. I don't know. So anyway, that's Upper Echelon. If you for some reason watch my channel and don't watch his, go subscribe to his channel because he is brilliant. He is one of the smarter gaming channels. I don't know if you can call him a gaming channel now. He's went into like exposés and stuff, but he is definitely one of the smartest guys that you can follow in this genre. Anyway, I'm General Grudge. Take care.